9 objects, 9 trails of ruin. A diamond that emptied bankers and drove queens to grief. A doll that a museum still receives apology letters for. A rock that keeps finding its way home. A painting that would not burn. You can call it coincidence. The people who owned these things call it something else. By the end of this list, you may agree with them. Number 9. Robert the Doll. In 1906, a boy named Eugene Otto received a doll as a gift, a stuffed figure with button eyes and a sailor's suit, handed down through a household on Eaton Street in Key West, Florida. For decades, that doll sat in an attic window, watching the street below. Neighborhood children swore he moved on his own. By the 1970s, a new tenant named Myrtle Reuter had bought the Otto house. She began finding the doll in different rooms than where she had left him. Footsteps crossed the attic floor at night. In 1994, unable to explain what she was living with, Reuter donated the doll to Key West's Fort East Martello Museum, along with a warning: he does not like being disrespected. That warning became the museum's policy. Visitors are told to ask Robert's permission before photographing him. Those who forget or who mock him report the same pattern afterward. Jammed cameras, missing luggage, sudden runs of bad luck. The museum now keeps a wall of apology letters, hundreds of them, mailed from every state and several countries, each one addressed directly to the doll, begging forgiveness. No one has ever proven Robert caused any of it. And yet the letters keep arriving, decade after decade, from people who never met each other and have nothing in common, except one afternoon spent standing in front of a glass case in Key West. What exactly do all those people believe they are confessing to? Number 8. Annabelle. In 1970, a mother in Hartford, Connecticut bought her daughter a Raggedy Ann doll from a hobby shop. Nothing about it looked unusual. Within weeks, the daughter and her roommate noticed the doll changing position on its own, left in poses neither of them remembered setting. Notes began appearing around the apartment, scrawled in a child's handwriting the two women had not written. A priest was called in. Then paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, who would go on to build one of the most well-known careers in American paranormal research, were brought in to examine the case. Their conclusion was that the doll had become a container for something that wanted a human host. The Warrens took the doll into their custody and sealed it inside a glass case built with blessed wood, marked with a warning sign that read, simply, "Do not open." It has remained there ever since, first in their home museum in Monroe, Connecticut, and now in the care of their family after Lorraine's death in 2019. Skeptics point out that every account of Annabelle's supposed attacks comes from the Warrens themselves, a couple whose entire livelihood depended on the public believing in cases exactly like this one. That skepticism is reasonable. It has not stopped decades of visitors from lining up outside that glass case, cameras up, daring the doll to prove them wrong. Number 7. The Crying Boy. In September 1985, a British tabloid ran a headline that unsettled the country. House after house gutted by fire, and inside each one the same object survived, untouched, face down in the ash. A mass-produced print of a weeping child, painted decades earlier by an Italian artist working under a pseudonym, sold by the thousands to working-class families across the country. Firefighters began noticing it themselves before the papers ever picked up the story. A living room reduced to char and ash, every piece of furniture destroyed, and hanging on the one wall still standing, that painting without so much as a scorch mark. One officer, speaking anonymously, claimed he had personally seen it survive 5 separate fires. Nothing else in those homes made it out. Investigators offered a mundane theory. The prints were likely produced on fire-resistant board, coated in a varnish that repelled flame better than the wood and fabric around it. That explanation never fully caught on. Homeowners kept reporting bad luck that started the moment the painting entered the house, and by the time the tabloid organized a public bonfire to destroy hundreds of donated copies at once, the country's fear of it was already hard to walk back. Collectors still find pristine copies in attics and thrift shops today, decades later, in exactly the condition they were sold in. Number 6. The Dibbuk Box. In 2001, a small wine cabinet turned up at an estate sale in Portland, Oregon, carved with Hebrew letters and sold by a woman whose mother had survived the Holocaust. She warned the buyer directly, never open it. Inside, she said, lived a dibbuk, a restless spirit from Jewish folklore that clings to objects rather than people. The writer who bought it ignored the warning. Within days, his house smelled faintly of urine no amount of cleaning could remove. Lights flickered without cause. He began having the same nightmare, night after night. An old woman pressing down on his chest, whispering in a language he could not place. He sold the box. The next owner had the identical dream, describing the same woman down to the details, despite never having spoken to the previous owner. A third buyer reported the box reappearing on his porch after he threw it out. Each new owner attached their own warning to the listing when they resold it, and each time, someone bought it anyway. The box eventually passed into the hands of a collector of haunted objects, sealed and kept in storage, refused by every museum approached about displaying it. Skeptics call the whole case a modern internet legend, amplified by people who wanted to believe. What is harder to explain is why strangers with no contact with one another kept describing the same face in the same dream. So, which of these objects would you actually be willing to keep in your own house? Drop your answer in the comments and subscribe if you haven't already. Number 5. The Unlucky Mummy. In the British Museum sits a painted wooden mummy board, catalogued as Artifact E A22542, roughly 5 feet long, and dating back nearly 3,000 years. The name is a misnomer, since the board itself holds no human remains. That distinction has never stopped its reputation. According to the legend, 4 Englishmen acquired the board in Egypt during the 1860s. One vanished into the desert, another was shot by accident and lost an arm. A third watched his entire fortune disappear, and the last fell ill and died in poverty. The board eventually passed to a household that began reporting its own run of misfortune, and when the family tried to have it photographed in 1887, both the photographer and the porter carrying it died shortly after, followed by the translator hired to read its hieroglyphs. By 1889, the board had been donated to the British Museum, where journalist Bertram Fletcher Robinson wrote about its history in 1904. He was dead within 3 years. The legend grew large enough that after the Titanic sank in 1912, survivors began repeating a rumor that the museum had quietly sold the cursed board to an American buyer, and that it had gone down with the ship. It never left London. The museum has said so plainly, on record, more than once. The board has been removed from its case exactly once since 1890 for a temporary exhibition, and returned safely every time. And still, the story of the ship that never carried it refuses to sink. Number 4. Uluru's Sorry Rocks. At the center of Australia sits Uluru, a sandstone monolith sacred to the Anangu people, who have warned for generations against removing any part of it. Tourists ignored that warning by the thousands, breaking off pebbles as souvenirs. Then the rocks started coming back. Beginning in the 1980s, park rangers at Uluru began receiving small packages in the mail, wrapped stone fragments sent from all over the world, each one accompanied by a letter. The letters described the same pattern: a piece of Uluru taken home, followed by a run of disaster. Car accidents, house fires, lost jobs, lost marriages. One letter describing a near-fatal skiing accident within 6 months of the theft. Rangers began storing the returned fragments in a section of the visitor center unofficially known as the Sorry Pile. By 2010, it held more than 1,000 pieces, each one labeled with the sender's confession. Some packages arrived years after the original theft, sent by children who had inherited the stolen rock without ever knowing where it came from. For the Anangu, this was never about punishment. Removing a piece of the land disrupts a spiritual balance they call jukurpa, and what outsiders call bad luck, they simply call consequence. In 2019, climbing Uluru was banned outright, out of respect for exactly this belief. The rocks, meanwhile, are still arriving. Number 3. The Delhi Purple Sapphire. The Delhi Purple Sapphire is actually an amethyst, violet and unremarkable to the eye, looted from a temple in India during the chaos of 1857 and carried back to England as a war trophy. Every owner after that point seemed to lose something. The soldier who took it lost his fortune and his health within a few years. His son inherited the stone along with his family's misfortune, falling into poverty and illness of his own. By 1890, it had passed to Edward Heron Allen, a respected British scientist who dismissed the idea of a curse outright. He accepted the gem anyway. Within months, his household was suffering from anxiety and sleeplessness he could not explain. He gave the stone away twice, and both times it came back to him, damaged by whatever misfortune had befallen the person he gave it to. He threw it into London's Regent's Canal to be rid of it for good. 3 months later, a dredging crew pulled it back out, and it eventually found its way back into his hands. By 1904, convinced the stone was harming his infant daughter, Heron Allen sealed it in a bank vault with written instructions. "Do not open this box for 33 years after my death, and when you do, throw the stone into the sea." His daughter followed his first instruction. She did not follow the second. In 1944, she donated it instead to London's Natural History Museum, where his warning letter is still kept alongside it. Number 2. The Koh-i-Noor diamond. First recorded in 1306 as part of an Indian dynasty's treasury, the Koh-i-Noor passed through the hands of sultans, Mughal emperors, and Persian conquerors for the next 400 years, and almost none of them died peacefully. In 1739, the Persian ruler Nader Shah invaded Delhi specifically to claim it, reportedly discovering it hidden inside a rival's turban during a ceremonial exchange of headwear. He was assassinated less than a decade later. The stone passed next to an Afghan ruler who lost his throne, then to a Sikh Maharaja, whose empire collapsed within years of acquiring it. In 1849, a 10-year-old boy named Duleep Singh, the last ruler of the Sikh Empire, was pressured into signing the diamond over to the British Crown after his mother had already been imprisoned. Queen Victoria took possession that same year, and from that point forward, the pattern shifted entirely. Every king who might have worn the Koh-i-Noor has instead passed it directly to his wife. Queen Alexandra wore it. So did Queen Mary. The Queen Mother wore it into her 90s, and it sat on her coffin at her funeral in 2002. No queen who has worn the Koh-i-Noor has ever met the fate its male owners did. The stone remains in the Tower of London today, and several countries, including India, Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan, have formally requested its return. Britain has refused every time. Number 1. The Hope Diamond. In 1911, an American heiress named Evelyn Walsh McLean wore a 45.52-carat blue diamond to a party in Washington, D.C., just weeks after acquiring it. She had no way of knowing that within the next decade, her son would be killed in a car accident, her daughter would take her own life, and her husband would be committed for insanity. The stone she wore that night had already ruined people for nearly 3 centuries. Cut originally from a much larger rough gem, said to have been pried from the eye of a Hindu idol in India, It was brought to France in the 1600s by the merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, who reportedly died soon after, torn apart by wild dogs. The stone was cut down for Louis XV, worn by Marie Antoinette, and vanished during the chaos of the French Revolution, only to resurface decades later in London under a new name, the Hope Diamond, after the banking family who acquired it. The list of owners after that reads like a casualty report. A Turkish sultan's mistress, murdered. A banker, bankrupted within months. In 1958, jeweler Harry Winston finally donated the stone to the Smithsonian Institution, mailing it there in a plain brown paper package through the regular postal service, as if daring the curse to interfere with something so ordinary. It never did, at least not that anyone can prove. The diamond sits under reinforced glass today, visited by millions of people every year, admired as one of the most valuable objects on Earth. Scientists at the Smithsonian will tell you, on the record, that it is simply a rare and beautiful mineral. But ask why they photograph its past owners and rarely display those photographs together, and the answer gets much harder to give. Thanks for watching.